The only thing tighter than Don Felder's pants is his rhythm section. Evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today is February 8th at 8:04 in the evening. We're transmitting you live from the Grand Library to bring you another bonus lesson, and this week it's going to be probably one of the most important ones you will ever hear / learn in your life. Today we're going to go over the only 7 bass lines that exist in this universe. Once you know them, you will hear them and realize how limited we truly are as a job and as a society.
2026.
Welcome to the Black Parade by
Take
MCR.
a look at the screen. The first bass line we have, we're just going to go in order from least complex to most complex in terms of rhythm. Whole notes are definitely the easiest. You know them as the donut, and they're worth 4 beats each. Take a look at the chords too. If I swap over G, D, E, and B, if you take a wild guess what the good old Mikey Way is playing, that's the letter of those chords. Minus the second one, he is using an inversion, which is very cool. An inversion just means he's starting on another note of the chord, and this one is the note F sharp. That is what we call the third because it's 3 letters up. D, E, F sharp. Not that hard, and it sounds cool because it's only 1 letter away from the next chord, E. As we saw, they go to E minor for the third one, smoothly creating a nice bass line between the first chord, the second, and the third. Very advanced. But regardless, we call this one the ballad because, well, it makes me cry every time. Let's listen to the robot. I compared it a little better than that, I promise. And I'll stop after that, because who knows, maybe after 30 seconds even the MIDI gets copyrighted. After our A's and D root notes, it's back to that repeat sign and on to verse 2. Truly, this is the simplest, because like we said, we're just playing root notes for however long the chord lasts. And in this case, it's a whole note because it's a ballad. We like longer lengths of time to really accentuate the sadness. But I digress. On to the next one. Shout by the Isley Brothers, not just known for their chipped ham, but also known for their half notes. This second type of bass line, ladies and gentlemen, if the ballad was categorized by whole notes, the halftime feel, or halftime in shorter terms, is just half notes. The answer is often in the name when it comes to music theory. F major is technically all of bar 5 and 6 before they go to D minor, but half notes make a more interesting experience for the listener than just the previous one, ballad whole notes. Especially because we're trying to make everyone get up and shout. It's a good idea to get more funky with it. Root, 5th, root. The last one used the 3rd. This one uses the 5th. A little bit more common. The 5th is what we call a basic tone because it's so stable sounding when played by itself against the root. It's also the power chord if you're a guitarist, as most of my students also are. Root, 5th, root, and then a passing tone again. Exactly how that F sharp was acting, but this is technically considered the 7th because F, G, A, B, C, D, E is 7 letters up from F. Regardless of the direction, we still call it 7. 7th takes us down to the root of the next chord, though. Half note, 5th. Root note, half note again. Root note D, half note 5th. Back to the root note D. And then a walk up. If you walk down, good to walk up. A little mirror match combo. And you can go to the lower octave C. No music police is going to stop you from getting creative like we said. We'll come back to this one later for, I believe, the 4th bass line, but we wouldn't go in order. But they call this the chorus. We'll come back for the verse. But before we move on, let's listen to the chorus. Again, these bass lines are so simple still, I almost want to rush right through to move on to the next one. But I do pay for this guy, so we might as well hear this guy. You get the point. You walk up, you walk down, you play half notes. It also is easier at the faster tempos versus some of the later bass lines. If you play quicker rhythms, that's just going to be more work for your fingers. Longer rhythms are going to be less work. 277 is pretty quick. Probably a good idea to keep it simple. And again, we'll come back to that verse for that reason. This third one you may have seen in a hit HBO series long time ago by Linda Ronstadt. Take things in stride, or at least a half note to start for variety. We can change up this third one before we get into the next one by simply getting creative. But I want you to repeat after me, students. The tumbao.
Tumbao.
The tumbao is just simply a word for a Latin groove. Latin grooves are primarily categorized by a dotted quarter note and eighth note rhythm to start. We can flip it around, add in a half note later, or even fill in the time with a quarter note and a quarter note to simulate a little bit of a walking bass line. If I scroll down, that's exactly what they do in the pre-chorus, and maybe a little bit before if my eyeballs weren't going 200 miles per hour. But root and fifth, just like the halftime. Basically a cooler version of the halftime, and some books will even call it a classic rhythm because it is so common. But classic is kind of cliche. I think all of these classic rhythms and variations actually come from Latin music. If we listen to early rock and roll, specifically Stand By Me by the Ben E. King, you can hear the congas and the shakers, and there's a whole Latin engine room just grooving it up behind them. And the bass line is basically playing a little bit of a 1 and 4 and 1 and the dotted quarter note and the eighth note rhythm. Almost more of a merengue, since he kind of skips the beat 4, or rather beat 3, but it doesn't have to be that rock solid of a definition. This is a new genre they're experimenting and creating with. That's why it sold 1 million records. You gotta actually get creative and do something new, and well, you gotta change it up just a little bit. And there is just that little bit of a variation. It's just kind of taking Latin and popularizing it. And if it worked for all of a nation, genre of music, it can work for us too, especially as rock and rollers. If I look at the chords, they're already just going to be root notes and just keeping it simple. I did say you can add fifths for variety, but it's mostly about the groove. If we listen to the MIDI in a second, you'll hear it's about leaving space for the melodist. The guitarist, the flute player, the vocal player, it does not matter. You gotta leave space if you want to have a place in this music industry, because no one really wants to hear you that much, bass player. Turn the down. Another example you can think from Low End Cinema Volume 1, this is also the Watchmen piece. When we listen to The Sound of Silence by Simon and Garfunkel, and probably copy and pasted by Disturbed and anybody else who ever tried to steal money off this record industry, it's all coming back to that tumbao. One might consider this the basic bossa nova groove as well, but a bossa nova typically always alternates between the root and the fifth. I like to keep it as definitionally accurate as possible. Since Latin music, there's usually a different tumbao per piece, or rather, a different percussion engine room going on. You're always matching that, so you're always going to match the song. Make it your own with those little variations, because you probably have the time before rehearsal and the time after rehearsal. That's probably what you want to do anyways. You're an artist. You like creating, so do it.
The four feel.
Alright, this next one's a personal favorite. I'll just admit I'm very biased towards this one. I always show my students the acoustic version because it's way better, but even the studio is the best ending song you can have to any movie. That gives me an idea for the next riffs to learn as we speak. If the tumbao was the dotted quarter note, we'll just get rid of that dotted quarter note and only play those quarter notes now. And look at the chords. A major and G. A, E, G, A, E, G. They fill in a little time with the eighth note, A, E, but that's just root and fifth, just like the halftime does, and the tumbao. But G is the root note anyways of the G chord, and it's right back to A. Rinse and repeat. But this is as funky as can be, ladies and gentlemen. Funk does not have to be sophisticated. As James Brown will tell you, it's all about landing on the one. And so a bonus lesson number 1. Triple forte is kinda extreme. That's up to you, Ultimate Guitar. Staccato, it's a vintage bass. Yeah, it sounds a little bit better. It's a little funkier if we make it staccato. That's why the tumbao is usually a little bit more funkier, just because when we add in those half notes, dotted quarter notes, they're usually played short. But that's also because a lot of vintage electric basses had their mutes still on them. If we listen to most Horace Silver records, my favorite of the Latin jazzers, it's a muted jazz bass. He couldn't sustain the note even if he tried. Back to the actual song.
Why are we still here?
Oh!
Just to suffer. Every
You
night.
hit spacebar, suddenly everyone loses their mind. Now that we're reset, let's take a look at the bridge later. Sorry, I meant to say the chorus, because they're gonna steal one of the most iconic riffs that we're gonna see in the last one. But first things first, let's go back real quick like we said. If we just had 4 on the floor, we gotta take a trip to the Isleys brothers because they were showing how it's done from the beginning. Past verse 1 to verse 2, we slow it down a little bit, or it's more just a way of writing it out differently, I suppose. Root, 2nd, 3rd, 4 is gonna land nicely to the root 7th, 6, 5. And then it's going to regurgitate and repeat on itself perfectly for the entire verse for us to be able to play it as fast as possible, because keep it simple, stupid. F major is that first chord. C major is that second chord. I shouldn't even have to jump over to the chords because the bass line is so obvious. We're starting with that letter F for a reason. We're starting with that letter C for a reason. It's called beat 1. It is the strongest, most foundational thing. And whatever we play there is going to sound like the root of the chord, unless it's an arpeggio, and then it'll sound nice and it's a cool passing tone. Either way, I digress. Walking bass lines are what we call this one. Quarter notes, roots on the beat. Anything else you want in between. Just as long as it smoothly connects to the next root, you're in business. You can kind of jump around. Really, the middle can be anything, as long as you start with the root and then use an approach tone. Approach tone just meaning the note that is below or above the next note that it's going into. That way it kind of leads the ear, kind of like you're walking into that next chord because we're playing a walking bass line. Crazy how it all happens. But I could have hit a quick arpeggio, and then the G, and then leaped up until the B. Zo-ba-doo-doo-dee-doo-doo-doo. And it would have sounded just as cool, if not spicier, but I don't think he wants to work that hard. And it does kind of nicely appeal to the ear, that linear line up and down if we drag one with our fingers. But hopefully that was on camera. I wasn't even checking that screen. If we drag a nice linear line with our fingers, that's what that bass line looks like. Remember, music is just math. You can put it on a graph, and it all boils down to just sine, cosine, and tangent. At the end of this verse, you notice they launch back into their half notes. If I haven't said it yet, a good bass line typically alternates between the two sections. Whether it's Come As You Are by Nirvana, or any of the other tunes we're looking at, notice it's usually something and then something else. A walking and a halftime, if it's a jazz tune. A shuffle, and maybe a ballad. It could be a riff and a shuffle, or, well, now I'm just spoiling the next ones. I did scroll back because before we move on, we will listen to that nice transition, because if we just talked about that transition, good to listen to it. It is an effect in and of itself. From the C. They do slow down. Oh! You get the point. It doesn't have to be perfect, ladies and gentlemen, but you do have to play your half notes on the beat and your quarter notes. Ladies and gentlemen, our second to last is probably the most important bass line you'll ever learn. This is called the shuffle. You take away the swing, it's punk rock, it's Eddie Van Halen, it's Hot for Teacher. But that's kind of weird. We have root notes all the way until we get to a fill in that second measure, though we're skipping all those rests, so this is technically measure 26 and 27. If I go over to the chords, it's all just A. And you can think that fill's coming from our A blues scale, using the C, the third, and the D, which would be the fourth. But copy and paste over and over and over again, because it is, well, an American tumbao, a groove, the shuffle. And again, if you need an example of punk rock, just listen to Blitzkrieg Bop by the Ramones. Any Green Day bass line for that example. Panic Song is 300 miles per hour on a pick, but it's just a shuffle without the swing, ladies and gentlemen. I will clarify, I'm not comparing Mike Dirt and Green Day to ZZ Top and saying they were at all. Well, he's not that bad. He's not that bad. Dusty Hill's better, but... He's not that bad. Speaking of Green Day, on to the next one. I know they stole this bass line too, but some might argue it came from CCR first. Though the Beatles stole it too. Everyone stole this one too. You should probably steal this one too, is what I'm saying. Root other notes. Do, la, sol, do, do. I love my solfege because it's nice and easy on the eyes and the ears. This bass line is called a riff. 3 5 3 3 5 3 3 2 3 3 3. We'll listen to it pretty soon, but it's just the same thing over and over and over again, and that is the definition of a riff, ladies and gentlemen. Just write something that you can wag your finger to. Give it to the guitarist, the bass player, give it to everybody. The more different riffs you can stack on top of each other, the more you're just going to sound like Charles Mingus. A lot of you hate jazz, though, so just keep it simple. So let's skip the first two measures, because I'm pretty sure that's just, well, some maracas or some engine room type. And that's the drums. The bass guitar. But again, it's just the pointer finger of the regular guitar, ladies and gentlemen. You saw the tab before. I know you heard it. It's also just the name of the song. That's why I always start with words. If you don't have words, how do you know what to write? Down on the corner, down on that corner, down on that corner. It's not that hard to write a song. It's pretty easy. Just say what the words are. That tells you direction. Is it happy? Then use a major chord. But everything lasts a 2-bar, a 4-bar phrase. Hit spacebar on the wrong screen. You notice there are some 1s, some 3s, some other strings, but still the same fret numbers. The distance between those frets is always the same, people, and that's how you know we transpose. We went over transposition in the first bonus lesson. If you don't know what that is by now, sign up for lessons down below. But we're gonna go back and kind of review it all right here, because that is technically every single bass line at your fingertips. I may have skipped some, I may have forgot to play some. Leave an angry comment down below, but either way, these are free. If we go back to the beginning, we started with whole notes, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Black Parade by MCR. It's just G, the third of D, and then the root of E minor. You can guess the rest, because there's nothing else to guess. After that, we have Twist and Shout. Different song. But you can tell that's the influence, and that's where they stole it from. Again, oh boy, these white people like stealing from these black people. Half notes on the beat, root, fifth, root, and you can add in a passing tone in between, just like the next rhythm, the tumbao. One might call it the bossa nova, some terrible method books will call it the classic rhythm, but that's cliche as all hell. Dotted quarter note, eighth note, dotted quarter note, eighth note, dotted quarter note, eighth note, dotted quarter note, eighth note. It's going to build a sense of propulsion and anticipation, matching that ride symbol of the drummer and the clack of that snare drum. Sounds great if you ask me, but we can even step it up further, get rid of the dot. Ah, quarter notes, quarter notes, quarter notes. And if I didn't point it out before, a riff down on the corner. The Psycho Killer B section is down on the corner. Down on the corner, and down on the corner, and down on the corner, on the corner, on the corner. But I'm not that down on the corn, and I won't get that down on that corner. And if it ain't a riff, ladies and gentlemen, if it ain't a ballad, if it ain't a halftime feel, if it ain't a 4 on the floor with the Psycho Killer, if it isn't a tumbao, it's gonna be a shuffle. Root note all day long. But if I said anything, if you got anything out of this, ladies and gentlemen, just put the root note. It's the bass. It's not the star of the show. Don't overthink it. A lot of you guys are guitarists as well as piano players, so when you write bass lines, just match the song that you're stealing from genre-wise, and guess what? It might be a different genre bass line, put in metal music, and now you like metal, and you didn't even realize it was jazz. Below you'll find a PDF with the definition, examples of all these bass lines, and a little pop quiz for you just to keep you on your toes. As always, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them in the comments down below, and I'll be sure to answer them. And feel free to sign up for lessons while you're there. Until next time, stay in the shed, cats.